Most people think they know what's going to hurt an avoidant ex after a breakup. But the very things that people try to do to make an avoidant ex feel the loss usually actually make them feel safer, more justified, and even more emotionally shut down. So if you want to understand what actually gets through to an avoidant ex after a breakup, you have to understand what they protect, what they suppress, and what really forces them to feel the loss. You can't just look at what would hurt you. You have to look at what disrupts their system, what removes their emotional buffer, what cuts off their usual escape routes, and what stops feeding the pattern that kept them comfortable in the first place. So stay tuned. If you're new here, hi, this is Lucia. I'm a dating and relationship expert specializing in helping you get your ex back or to get over your ex. And if you're not new, you're part of my no contact army, and welcome back. It's always great to have you. Okay, so the first thing that hurts an avoidant ex after a breakup is when you go completely silent. Of course, you knew I was going to say that if you've been listening to me for a while. And I do not mean fake silence. I don't mean silence for a few days or a week while you watch their stories. I don't mean disappearing in a dramatic way so they panic and come running. I mean real silence, the kind where you stop chasing, stop checking in, stop trying to keep the emotional thread alive, and stop making yourself available in the background. That hits harder than people realize. Avoidant exes are used to some version of this dynamic. They pull away, but the other person keeps reaching. They create distance, but the other person keeps the bond alive. They break the closeness, but they still quietly expect access. That's why so many of them don't fully feel the breakup right away. The breakup may have happened technically, but emotionally, the connection is still being maintained by the other person. In other words, you. You're still texting, still explaining, still waiting, still reacting, still emotionally available. So the avoidant gets distance without having to fully feel the loss. They get relief without consequences. What could be better than that? That's why real silence can hit them so hard, because now there's no emotional buffer. Now they do not get to feel in control while you keep the connection warm for them. Now they don't get to assume that you'll still be there when they feel lonely, curious, guilty, or restless. And now they have to confront the possibility that this breakup didn't just create distance, it created loss. And loss lands very differently when no one's chasing you. And by the way, if you would like my help to get your ex back, I do offer one-on-one coaching, and you can get the rates at theartoflove.net/coaching, and we will send them to you. They are not on the website. The second thing that hurts an avoidant ex after a breakup is when you become emotionally unavailable to them. Now, this is different from silence, although, of course, the two can overlap. A lot of people, they stop reaching out, but emotionally, they're still right there. So if the ex sends a breadcrumb, they jump. If the ex drops a low-effort message, they light up. If the ex appears confused, distant, or inconsistent, they rush in with empathy or softness or reassurance. So even though they're technically in no contact or technically pulling back, emotionally, they're still very accessible. And avoidant exes can feel that, because even the avoidant who acts detached still knows that they can reach you. They want to know if the bond is still there if they need it. They want to know they still matter. They want to know that they can open the door and you'll still be standing there emotionally ready. That's why becoming emotionally unavailable can affect them more than some big dramatic display. Because now they're not just dealing with physical distance, they're dealing with the collapse of emotional access. They're dealing with the fact that the person who used to provide warmth and validation and understanding is no longer waiting there on standby. And that is important because many avoidant dynamics are built on imbalance, as I'm sure you found out. One person overfunctions emotionally while the other underfunctions. One person keeps trying to talk, fix, process, and connect, while the other one keeps one foot out the door. So when you stop emotionally overfunctioning, the whole thing changes. Now they can't lean on your availability while giving very little back. Now they have to feel what your absence actually feels like instead of relying on your continued openness to soften it. And to help you stay silent, I have my app Silencio, which is available on the App Store and on Google Play. And the link to that is underneath every single video and podcast. And if you still practice the ancient art of reading books, I have a book that you can get at nocontactsecrets.com, where you can read 2 free chapters before you purchase the book. And the link to that is underneath, of course, also every video and podcast. Okay, the third thing that hurts an avoidant ex after a breakup is seeing that you are genuinely doing better without them. And this is where a lot of people get sloppy because they think, okay, so I just need to look happy, right? No, because performative happiness still feels emotionally hooked. It still feels like it's for them. It still carries this energy of, please notice me, please react, please see what you lost. This is not what hits hardest. What hits hardest is when it becomes clear that your growth isn't a message to them. It's a choice for you. You're calmer, less chaotic, rebuilding your life. You're becoming harder to pull back into the old cycle. You're not waiting at the door emotionally. And that affects an avoidant because it forces them to confront something they may not have wanted to face. That maybe you were not the unstable one. You weren't the one creating all the heaviness. Maybe your pain wasn't the problem. Maybe the relationship didn't feel difficult just because of your needs. Maybe their own patterns were a major part of the breakdown. And when you're genuinely doing better, it becomes harder for them to keep telling themselves the old story, right? That you were too much, that the breakup was entirely necessary because of your emotions, that the relationship failed because you couldn't handle things. So your growth becomes evidence that the problem was never just about your reaction. It was the dynamic and their role in it. The fourth thing that hurts an avoidant ex after a breakup is when they start to realize that they were the problem. Now, this doesn't mean that every avoidant is going to wake up one day and become deeply self-aware and send a beautiful accountability text. A lot of them won't, as much as we wish they would. Some avoidants are going to double down in denial. Some are going to keep distracting themselves. Some will keep breadcrumbing. Some are going to jump into something else. Some will disappear completely. And some will come back only when they're lonely, bored, or dysregulated, not because they've changed. So this isn't about fantasy, but when an avoidant ex starts to feel the loss in a real way, one of the most painful parts isn't just missing you. It's confronting their own role. It's realizing that they deactivated instead of dealing. They protected themselves at the cost of the relationship. They kept choosing distance and avoidance and ambiguity and self-protection until the bond had no choice but to collapse. And that kind of pain is different because it's not just grief, it's accountability. It's realizing that they may have lost someone valuable, not because love was impossible, but because they couldn't tolerate what real closeness required. That hurts, especially if you're no longer there trying to make it easy for them to escape into blame or confusion or access. And this leads to something important. A lot of people want to know, well, do avoidants feel pain after a breakup? Yes, of course, but pain isn't the same as growth. It's not the same as accountability or emotional maturity or being ready for a healthy relationship. An avoidant ex can miss you and still not be capable of showing up differently. They can feel your absence and still reach for the same defenses. They can hurt and unfortunately still choose stagnation. And that's why your goal cannot be to make them suffer enough to come back. Your goal has to be to stop participating in the dynamic that kept you stuck because there are really only two paths an avoidant ex can take after a breakup. The first one is growth, and that is where they do the uncomfortable work. They reflect. They stop hiding behind vagueness and distance. They learn to tolerate vulnerability instead of running from it. And if they come back with more than longing. They come back with ownership and change behavior. The other path is stagnation. That's where they stay the same. So they breadcrumb. They resurface, but without substance. They want access without responsibility. They miss you, but they don't change. They want relief, but are not willing to repair. And a lot of people confuse the two paths. They think that missing means growth. They think that reaching out means that they've changed, and that pain equals readiness, but it doesn't. Someone can feel the loss and still not be safe for you. That's why the deepest takeaway here isn't, how do I hurt my avoidant ex? The deepest takeaway is, what gets through to an avoidant ex is often the moment you stop protecting them from the consequences of losing you. Not by punishing them or playing games or acting detached, but by actually withdrawing your emotional labor, reclaiming your attention, building a life that's not centered on whether they come back or not. They have to feel the consequences. That's the only way they're going to decide to change. So actually become someone who's no longer available for half love, confusion, and intermittent connection. And ironically, that's also what starts healing you, because at some point, this has to be less about what hurts them and more about what frees you. And if your ex is avoidant, the temptation is to keep trying to crack the code, to keep trying to understand what they feel, when they feel it, whether they miss you, whether they regret it, whether your silence is working, whether your absence matters. But the more secure question is not, how do I get through to them? It is, why would I keep organizing my life around someone who could only love me from a distance? Because the version of you that heals is not the version still trying to make an avoidant ex understand. It's the version that finally understands enough to let the pattern end. Okay? So now I want to hear from you. Do you have any questions or comments to anything I've said? Please comment below. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos or episodes if you're listening as a podcast. And finally, remember, love inspires, empowers, uplifts, and enlightens.